Now joining the meeting. Please wait for the leader to admit you to the meeting. Thank you for your patience. You are now joining the meeting.
To adoption of the agenda.
This meeting is being recorded and/or transcribed.
May I please have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Move. A motion to adopt.
You've been muted. To unmute yourself, press *6.
The clerk calls the roll. Hearing none, could the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Kozak.
Aye.
Commissioner Perry.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Schwarzkopf.
Aye.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Newborn.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes and the agenda is adopted. Item 1 on the agenda is the chair's report, and our report is quite brief today. As some of you have already heard, we intended to have Hennepin County Sheriff David Hutchinson join us for part of the interview today, but he had a last-minute conflict, and so he won't be able to attend. We're hoping that we can contact him in between meetings if necessary to ask questions of him, and then we can report back. Deputy Chief Forrest is here with our thanks, and so we will be devoting the meeting to the documents that he's given us and questions that we may have regarding the interaction of the Minneapolis Police Department with other public safety agencies in the region. I also wanted to remind everyone that if you have questions from last week's session, since we ran out of time, please forward them to the chairs and we will forward them to the people who came last week. And if you have questions for next week's session with the city attorneys that you'd like to pose in advance for them, please also send those as well. The work plan for next week does give the basic agenda. And that's about it for the chair's report, unless there's any discussion or question. Hearing none, we'll go to item 2 on the agenda, which is the interview of our invited guest, Deputy Chief Forrest, who's also our liaison. So we thank you for wearing 2 hats today. And this is to answer questions regarding public safety in the city of Minneapolis. And so I will turn that over to start us out to Commissioner Newborn.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much, Deputy Chief Forrest, for joining us. And would like for you to kind of give us and start with your presentation, the materials that you provided, and giving us an overview.
Yes. I'll have to look at varied documents. One moment, please. Okay. Okay, I have to look on the... Sorry, my computer is not acting well for me. Okay, yeah, I'll have to punt here. Okay, I think we can start out. One of the questions that was raised was on the co-responder program. I believe that was some of the materials that had been provided. And in regards of what, and I believe the question that was posed was specific to the co-responder program. trying to find the exact. The outcomes or effects of the 2019 Co-Responder Program. And a bit with the Co-Responder Program is a partnership with Hennepin County COPE. COPE stands for Community Outreach for Psychiatric Emergencies. It is a partnership between mental health professionals and sworn law enforcement so that they can respond out on calls that are considered emotionally disturbed people. These calls, all of our officers in the department receive crisis intervention training, but this affords officers who volunteer to work with the COPE employees to spend a little bit more time and provide deeper services to those who are calling with emotionally disturbed incidents. The purpose is to provide effective and compassionate crisis intervention to individuals with mental illness in the community and providing more comprehensive service alongside mental health professionals who can conduct on-site assessments and have greater knowledge of the resources available. The goals of all this were to reduce hospitalization and arrest of those experiencing mental illness in the community, and also to reduce injuries to officers and also those same individuals experiencing mental illness. We also wanted to reduce future use of force events and then also reduce the amount of time that the non-co-responder officers spent on these EDP calls or emotionally disturbed person calls. We were looking to provide services where we saw that there was a gap. The team consisted of 5 sworn MPD officers, as I said, and 5 mental health professionals from COPE. They go around in unmarked squad cars. They each work out of the teams housed out of each of the respective precincts where they operate. The unit as a whole responds to calls for service citywide. The officers wear what would be considered a softer uniform, a full duty belt, but a polo shirt with MPD insignia. And the hours of operation that we were working was 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday as part of that program. It started as a pilot project in the 3rd and 5th precincts in September of 2017. In January of 2019, this unit expanded to downtown, and in May of 2019, the unit expanded into North Minneapolis 4th precinct. June 2019, it expanded citywide with an extension into the 2nd precinct.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Do you want me to try and put the PowerPoint on screen?
That would be great.
I will try to do that.
We'll see where we're at. I'm sure you'll have control over it. There we go. Okay.
And then tell me if you need me to advance the slides.
Yeah, go ahead and advance the slides, please. Okay, you can see a little example of what I'm discussing here with the co-responder teams on the job. Next slide, please. Day-to-day actions of the co-responder team. They monitor 911 calls. It's a particularly emotionally disturbed person calls. If officers who are responding to these calls see that they're on a call that they think would benefit from the presence of the co-responders or the in-depth extra service, they can request the team to respond. They also provide outreach with the unhoused community members in Minneapolis. Can you advance the slide, please? Typical call for this type of unit, 911 calls made for an emotionally disturbed person. Per policy, a 2-officer squad is dispatched to the call. The co-responder unit will assign to the call if they are asked to go, or they might self-assign and see the remarks in the call and recognize the need for their response. Once the scene is considered safe, the co-responder arrive and release the primary squad so they can go back into regular duty, or they also assist in some manner. The co-responder unit will then conduct an on-scene assessment with the patient and or help the patient find a solution. Next slide, please. Again, you kind of see the matrix here of how a typical call works. Call comes in, kind of the tree, a 2-officer squad arrives, renders the scene safe. A correspondent unit will arrive. They will do an assessment. They'll perform an assessment on site. Perhaps they can find an alternative solution, being transporting to another facility or to a family or friend's house. Another alternative is that the patient might not be able to be assessed on site due to circumstances that are viewed by the professionals, and they'll be transported to the hospital. Next slide, please. Follow-up services are an important thing that the Correspondent program provides. They may follow up from 911 calls that occurred outside the Corresponder team hours that, through information provided, officers recognized that this was an incident that appeared to be something that stemmed from what they believed to be mental illness, and they thought perhaps the co-responders could come out and help provide those services. Also respond to tips from community members, officers, social service agencies regarding potential or mental health clients, and also provide stabilization services, ongoing support to those once they've been released from a hospital or clinical setting. For those who may need longer-term stabilization, COPE will step in to provide it. Next slide, please. You kind of see a little bit of this was over the course of a year of what were categorized by MECC as emotionally disturbed person calls for service. The last year, the leading precinct was the 3rd precinct with 1,500. And you kind of see where it ranges from there. Again, these are calls that are being categorized as emotionally disturbed person calls. That doesn't mean that other calls that come in may not involve someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis. These are ones that, through questioning, have been immediately characterized as emotionally disturbed person's call. I don't want this to understate the effect of mental health crisis probably on other calls for service that we do see. Next slide, please. Measures. Co-responding officers required to complete a statistics form on each call that they respond to during their shift, and it's collected weekly and aggregated monthly. Next slide, please. And you can see an example of what that slide looks like. Next slide, please. Data. The data collected between September 11, 2017 and January 1st, 2020. This data represented in this report includes a combined account of both the unit responding to 911 response calls to assist already responding squads and follow-up conducted and generated by the co-responder unit staff. You can see the definitions of 911 response call is when the co-responder unit responds to assist a dispatch squad on the 911 call that came in from dispatch, predominantly emotionally disturbed person calls. And then there's follow-up calls where they conduct follow-up with a client either from a previous contact by the co-responder unit or from a previous emotionally disturbed person call that was made outside of the co-responder unit hours. Next slide, please. The data showed that there was 3,306 contacts attempted by the co-responder unit between the listed dates with both 911 response calls and follow-up calls. 2,900 were for adults, around 393 were for juveniles. They conducted 961 assessments, and those were conducted by the mental health professional that was assigned to the co-responder unit. And they had 5 use of force incidents when a person at one of these calls assaulted an officer, which is considering of 3,306 contacts is a very low number. Next slide, please. Here you see the co-responder response data, and this is based on 1,775 total events where the co-responder unit responded to an address since September of 2017. You can see a little bit of how the disposition breaks down between the client remaining at home, the client being transported to a hospital or crisis residence, having no service where either the person probably on follow-up wouldn't answer the door or wasn't there for them to provide that service. And then out of all those 1,775 events, they resulted in 7 arrests. Next slide, please. The 2019 data resulted in 2,270 total contacts in 2019, and that was between 911 response or follow-up with team members. Of those 2,270 total contacts for 2019, 1,093 were 911 dispatch calls, and a little over 1,100, so 1,177 were for follow-up services. Again, the breakdown is fairly similar. About 2,025 were for adults, 245 were for juveniles, and they provided 793 total assessments conducted by the co-mental health professionals. In the 2019 data, they ended up with 2 uses of force as a result of an assault on 2,270 contacts. Next slide, please. Here you see dispositions for the 682 total events where the co-responder units were dispatched to address in 2019 based upon the precincts. And I can't see the bottom tab because of the bar across there, but it breaks down with remaining at home, hospital, crisis, residents gone on arrival, no service, and arrest. The arrests are extraordinarily low. The bulk of our contacts are between taking either people to hospital or crisis residence or remaining at home. In the 5th precinct, it seemed because of a lot of the follow-ups that it was going to be gone on arrival or no service. That provides a snapshot of the co-responder unit based on our 2019 data. Before I move on from that, does anyone have any questions based upon that?
Thank you so much, Deputy. Anyone of our commissioners have any questions? And if so, if you want to either raise your hand or put your name in the chat. It seems like Commissioner Garcia asked that this presentation be sent to us. Yes, I think we can make that happen after this meeting. Commissioner Swartzkopf?
Commissioner Newborn, before you move on from that, I will point out, I hope my screen is still sharing. If not, all of the materials that were provided by the MPD, by DC4s, are linked to the agenda from August 25th. So I'm just pulling up those links. All of the commissioners and the public have access to these documents.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Casey. Commissioner Swartzkopf.
Can you tell me what happens when you, after 6 o'clock at night or on weekends?
Those calls are handled by our officers. As I said earlier, all of our officers are trained and have gone through crisis intervention training. So they recognize and have had experience and, like I said, in training in handling calls involving mental illness. In those cases, the officers themselves would go out, assess the situation, talk to the person, try to determine whether or not, what level of service do they need? Are they in danger of harming themselves or others? Should they go to the hospital? Is this a situation that maybe you can enlist a family member or a friend to intervene and perhaps collaborate to calm this person down? Is it a self-transport? Sometimes people want to go themselves to a hospital. They need assistance getting there. Or they may recognize and settle the situation down so it's not an emergency situation, but then also recognize that this is a case that could use some additional assistance, a deeper dive, a deeper grasp of services. And those are the cases where the responding officers then forward that information onto the co-responders so that when they are on duty, they can go back and do some follow-up. And the purpose of that is hopefully that we're not just putting a Band-Aid on the effects of mental illness and dealing with people. Because I can say through my experience of being on patrol, if people are in the throes of mental illness and suffering from that, they can, in a short period of time, generate a lot of 911 calls. They may not all be the type of calls that necessitate anyone being taken out of their home or going to jail, but the results of their mental illness are causing situations or circumstances where people are either calling or they're calling themselves. This way we are able to get a mental health professional to spend a little bit more time and use their expertise and their training to perhaps intervene, get the assistance, get the help that this person needs. And what we're looking for is that it helps stabilize that person and that they're not a frequent user of emergency services.
Should the COPE program be a 24/7 program? Would that be more helpful?
It would be a capacity issue for COPE. I think anytime we have these emergency psychiatric services, that would be a wonderful thing. I think we would all be in support of that. But I think, it's the limiting factor on that would be the available personnel to do so. Do the mental health professionals have the staff available and enough of the trained staff to accommodate that?
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for your question. I believe, is it Commissioner Cohen who has a question?
Commissioner Kozak.
Kozak, I'm sorry. Commissioner Kozak?
That's okay, Madam Chair. I just had a quick question.
Yes.
Was there an attempt, either earlier this year, during last year's budget for the city, to have the correspondent operation be funded on a 24/7 basis? Has that ever been attempted?
That I don't have knowledge on that. I'm sorry. I can look into that. I don't know necessarily whether that was a budgetary ask, and if it was, where it stemmed from, whether that was an MPD ask or a different ask. I can look into that and see what the answer I have for that.
Thank you, because I think that would be if I had an agenda or a list of items that should happen, I think that would be one of them.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Kozak. Commissioner Perry, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Has there been any research in the percentage drop in use of force with the co-responder program?
You mean overall, or just in terms of that? I don't know if if there's been a correlated drop in that. We'd have to look and see how it also would be depending upon what the parameters on the use of force reporting are. If we're expanding our use of force reporting, we'll have to drill down and filter out which ones are, what it is that we're trying to find. I can look and see if there have been any correlations or what the data shows between the co-responder and the use of force. Without having that data in front of me, I would imagine anytime we have a unit that's going out on calls, to the 2,000 and 3,000 calls a year range, and especially surrounding those experiencing mental illness, it's a fairly low use of force ratio that we're seeing out of all of those reported contacts. I would like to think that would you would see that reflected in some type of reduction of use of force. But without having that data in front of me, I can't specifically say for certain. But I'll see what I can come up with on that.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate it. I didn't expect you to have that data on hand, but that information on hand, but was hoping that you could look into that when you had time to do that.
Well, it's definitely one of the goals of the program. Anytime we have these, anytime we have any type of I would say a partnership program where we're looking into some of the our most vulnerable populations, and that would be the mentally ill and also those experiencing homelessness, which generally has a deep connection between addiction and mental illness as well. Anytime we have those partnerships where we partner either with professionals in that or with public or with service providers, on top of helping to build those relationships and provide better services for the public, again, our goal is that, we're reducing those interactions with people that can go bad, and we're trying to reduce those interactions that result in use of force, and hopefully trying to get to the root cause of what's going on and solve the problem so that way the police don't have to come back. The police are not the best tool to respond to mental illness. We're not the best tool to respond to addiction. We're not the best tool to respond to those experiencing homelessness. Traditionally, we become that because we're a 24-hour emergency response operation, and then those who we're experiencing all three can and do get themselves involved in situations that generate 911 calls. And so we typically have a lot of those interactions, and we recognize that rather than just try to deal with the problem at hand and just trying to get that little problem solved for the day or the night or the hour, how can we get to the root cause or try to get services to the root cause so then we don't have to deal with that person in that type of situation anymore, and hopefully get them the help that they need. So that's why programs like this, any of our partnerships that we have going with the homeless initiatives and things like that are so key, because they really do, not only do they get the services to the people that need it, but it does have a correlation in reducing negative interactions with the police and even any interaction with the police. That's the goal.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Perry. I believe Commissioner Garcia would like to ask the question.
Yes, thank you. I think you may have just touched on this with your last answer, but I was going to ask about, so often there's such a fine line between mental illness and chemical dependency, and even self-medicating.
Exactly.
That once the team shows up, how are they equipped, or are they equipped to then respond to a chemical dependency issue?
In terms of just having the resources or the knowledge base on chemical addiction?
Yes, because you talked about the mental health knowledge and approach, and do the mental health professionals or even officers happen to have cross-training on what if people present with chemical dependency issues?
I know chemical dependent, and you hit it at a very important point, and that is many people who are suffering from mental illness self-medicate with illicit narcotics or even prescription medication that isn't necessarily what they should be taking, because unfortunately sometimes a lot of the medication for them makes them not feel well, or it makes them feel that they're not necessarily themselves. And I went through crisis intervention training. I was in one of the first classes many years ago. I'm not going to say the amount of years because, but that was very much a discussion point. And even then, and which I think is something that we all carry with us. We recognize that, again, sometimes our most vulnerable people, there's a lot of intersection between mental illness and addiction as well. And without being able to speak for the COPE professionals, these are generally people who have master's level education. I would be very surprised if this being their area of expertise, that they wouldn't have a very good grasp on understanding that. When it comes to addiction, I would say that we're doing better about having people recognize that, and also, equipping them for, I would say, emergency type resources such as Narcan, recognizing when people could be experiencing overdose from opioids, and hopefully, being able to intercede in that regard. But without, I don't want to put words in the mouth of our COPE professionals, but I would be highly shocked if, as you and I discussed, the very obvious intersection of those two, if that isn't something that is being addressed.
A little bit of a follow-up question, and you may not know this offhand, but has the police department looked into ACT teams? Seems like this co-responder is an offshoot of an ACT team. Do you know what an ACT team is?
Can you help explain that? Describe it.
In my former life, I was worked on behalf of organizations working with people experiencing homelessness. An ACT team has a fiduciary model. It's a evidence-based practice, so ACT. It has a series of professionals, so we'll have a psychiatrist, a doctor, a nurse, with a homeless outreach professional, each with coming to the table with a different expertise of a slice of what could be, a plethora of issues in a case like this. And they will meet with, it was designed around people experiencing homelessness and getting people housed. So when there was an issue, they would come together, kind of a social service SWAT team, so to speak.
Okay.
Come together to be able to meet the person where they are. Again, it's highly prescriptive, and be able to meet quickly and often daily, around their cases with a very, very small caseload, but they're they're very nimble and can be deployed very quickly.
It sounds like a wonderful program and approach, and as much as, I know we would be in great support of something like that. I see a program like that best suited out of our health department, as obvious because of I would not consider what is going on as a policing problem, but that's a health issue, and I know there's a lot of intersection with that because we end up seeing the results of those that aren't getting the services that they need. And generally, we can be the kind of people that help identify those that could use that service the best. We don't have anything that robust that I'm aware of, especially operating. That would be a fantastic program. We do have a homeless outreach initiative where we have a homeless and vulnerable populations initiative that goes out and really kind of tries to have that intersection with those who are experiencing homelessness and helping try to figure out what's working and what's needed and help to be an advocate and get them equal access. A lot of that is to try to help bridge that intersection where so many of the, I would say, sometimes we get a lot of extraneous calls for service between a community and business members as a result of the unhoused. And it's not necessarily an illegal issue that's going on, but it's a place that we can try to help bridge that gap in between and either get people to the services they need or help them, I would say, manage that space, because it's a difficult space for them to be in. That's a very interesting thing you described. I know another question I had seen forwarded was about the STAR program that in Denver, or it's kind of based off the same model as Cahoots, I believe, in Oregon. Those are also wonderful, almost paramedic emergency responses to mental illness. I've been a big advocate of saying that is what's needed. If I could wave a magic wand and have mental health paramedic units that respond to those, that would be fantastic. I think that would be great, because it truly is, it truly shouldn't be a police issue, but it is for a variety of reasons, and that is sometimes public's perception and not lack of understanding on the mental illness. And again, the fact that, we're a 24-hour emergency response organization, and sometimes things like this, although it shouldn't necessarily be in our bucket, ends up in our bucket to deal with. And we try to do our best to train people to recognize some of the important things and to give them the tools to help recognize things, but it would be best served by those who are experts in that field.
I know that in Minnesota, the counties receive funding for that type of thing. And I know there, in my opinion, and I think many, and perhaps others' opinion, an interdisciplinary approach, not just with health, but with police and homelessness, because there's the approach that the health department has is often very much like a patient-health professional relationship. And there's a lot of literature about, especially working with people experiencing homelessness, about natural consequences, harm reduction, and working with the individual to have choices. That is kind of a little bit different than the public health, we know what's best for you, because they each have their own place and their own time. But with multi-layered issues, especially the low-level offenses like petty theft, urinating in public, all those things that, kind of bridge that social service police piece. And I am really impressed with Chief Arredondo's background and master's degree in human services. And I think his perspective and sensitivity with that when I rule the world, I really want to give him a front seat at that table, because the intersection of police and human services, I think, is just key. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Let's see. I don't see any other questions as of right now. I think in the chat, Casey has outlined that the other docs submitted include procedural forms for 2014 to 2019 and new MPD values and action plans. The other documents that Deputy Chief, you included in the email to us. Would you like to go through those as well?
Yes, let me see other docs include forms in 2014-20. Yes, and the new MPD. Yes, those are perfect ones to go over. In fact, I have essentially I can talk a little bit about some of the policies and reforms leading up, starting around 2014 and going through 2019, the end of 2019, and then I can touch base a little bit on the chief's vision on creating a new MPD in terms of moving forward and where we're at. And some of these things I've had a very, I would say, deep knowledge or deep hand in. Some things maybe not so much. Here we have okay, so I can see the document, so at least I'm going off the same document as you. The first we'll start out with in 2014 was procedural justice. Everyone, including civilian staff, received ongoing procedural justice training, recruitment, background hiring, retention efforts, all centered around procedural justice. I was very much a part of this. This resulted from our participation in the I'm just totally blanked out. I'm sorry. And I would say it's not the National Networks for Safe Communities, but it was, we're part of the, we're one of the, I think it was the National Network, that brought and were part of bringing procedural justice, and then Group Violence Initiative was also tied into that. But procedural justice essentially is really a way of teaching people, having them understand how you treat people and the way you treat people, and it really is tied into police legitimacy, the concepts of police legitimacy, and that is that the public, if they feel that the police are out there doing the right things for the right reasons, they're more likely to feel that the police are working in their best interest. They're more likely to cooperate with the police. They're more likely to even obey the law, and so there's multitude of reasons on why procedural justice is so important. We also touched very heavily on implicit bias and how that works. Again, about procedural justice is a very deep dive into policing history, on the impact of police on the community, particularly on some of our marginalized communities, the African American community. What role has law enforcement played? Recognizing how some of the harm that we have done throughout communities, and can explain why do people feel the way they do? Why do people have perceptions about law enforcement? And if you don't understand where that history is coming from, you're not going to fully understand where the gaps are in terms of trust and legitimacy. Procedural justice is really based around the individual interaction, and it's also based upon the larger interaction in terms of policy. It's very much about each individual interaction and how are you looking at the entire department. Talking about giving people voice. When you're dealing with people, ensuring that they have a voice, that you're hearing them, that they're not I should say, they don't feel that they're being ignored. Neutrality, treating people with neutrality, not going into situations or things with predisposed with your biases. Respect, treating people with respect. In all your interactions, giving people the innate human dignity that they deserve. And that results in trustworthiness, which is the last pillar of procedural justice, and trustworthiness is what we're looking for. I went out to Chicago, participated in a Train the Trainer event, then came back and helped to develop procedural justice training for the entire department. Actually gave training to the entire department in 2014. Helped develop a second module, and then I was promoted, and I left the unit. And we subsequently continued to provide procedural justice training to the department. And now it is just part of our DNA. It's part of how we deal with our training. Are we looking at things from a procedural justice perspective? Another important thing about procedural justice, as you can tell, it's I think near and dear to me, is that it's equally as important for us to have internal procedural justice within the agency. We cannot expect our employees to treat the public in a respectful and trustworthy manner if we do not do that to our own employees. We're very diligent, and we want to model that behavior from the first day people are in our academy to the person who's walking out the door after a 30-some-year career. We want that philosophy of procedural justice, and especially, and as we're seeing now, and I've said over and over again, police legitimacy and public trust is the most foremost issue, and it's the thing that we need to work the hardest on. So moving on from that, we created a procedural justice division and unit that helped drive those points home and help to provide training down to the unit level. Boy, I can tell I'm getting older because my eyes are starting to go. Interactive diversion program, that was in 16, and that was a diversion program targeted towards individuals charged with obstruction. Interact provides an opportunity for these individuals to share their voice and ultimately expunge the obstruction charge from their record. This provided people the opportunity to meet with someone from within the police department rather than have these obstructing the police charges, which are generally charges that come about from either not listening to the officer, and they're usually born of conflict of people who don't want to listen to what the officer is telling them to do. And these are things that I think by sitting down and having these one-on-one interactions, it's best to, I would say, build public trust and build those relationships rather than having an obstruction charge be on that person's record. Project Life, or the Group Violence Intervention Program, Director Sasha Cotton from the Office of Violence Prevention touched on this one. The NPD is an active participant in this. It's a public health-based initiative to reduce group member-involved gun violence. And the mission of GBI is to keep young men safe and free and reduce the impact of gun violence within the community. This is another program that is headed by, that we work through John Jay College and the National Network for Safe Communities. And it's a data-driven approach, and it uses combinations of, I would say, social outreach, providing the I'm trying to find the one document. My eyes are not so good anymore as I'm trying to look at this. Sorry. But we work with the social outreach from the health department that provide the assistance and the help to those young men, generally almost all young men who are involved in group and gang violence. We know that data shows that they are the most likely to be involved in violence and can be the drivers of violence in neighborhoods. Therefore, through data and through interaction, we invite them to a meeting. We provide them, thank you, with the message, the GBI message, which is that we want you safe, alive, and free. We want you out of jail. We want you successful in life. The lifestyle or the way you've been living, the choices you've been making are damaging to you. They're damaging to the community, and they're damaging to your family. The help is here. We want to help you. We want to get you a career. We want to get you on the right path. But the message is also that if you choose to continue this, if you choose to go back to your groups and your group becomes the most violent group or commits a homicide, then collectively the law enforcement community is going to come after that group and those individuals, and we will do what we do from law enforcement. It's not what we want to do, but it's a promise that we make to them, and it's been effective up until our recent rise of violence. We had been making very good headway into that because, as we know, there is a small group of very active, unfortunate young men who are and can be the drivers of violence in the community. So we continue to work with the Office of Violence Prevention in coordinating the GVI program. We obviously are the law enforcement arm of the GVI program, but COVID has kind of made things challenging in terms of our outreach abilities to go out with social the street outreach and visit with, we'll do home visits or site visits to deliver the message to these young men. And that's, as I'm sure everyone understands, since the pandemic, a lot of these outreach possibilities have been very challenging. We talked about the co-responder program, so I'm not going to go over that too much. In September of 2017, the chief put out his values and vision and philosophy, and that is that sanctity of life is a cornerstone of everything, defining peace officers as guardians, the men and women, both sworn and civilian of the NPD, continuing to build trusting and positive relations with their communities in a mutual effort, again, about harm reduction, reducing harm and increasing hope. In November of 17, we expanded our open data, wanting greater transparency, readily available public data and information via online dashboards. That included use of force, stop data, officer involved shooting data, and community crime maps. We did a lot of this and also intersected and communicated with the ACLU on this, and I know that they were very supportive, and they felt very positive about the amount of data that we were outward facing and being public with compared to many other jurisdictions that do not provide this data. Looks like this one says January of 17. I don't know if that got misdated. The NPD outreach and mentoring with corrections. This falls into one of the buckets where people asked about our youth interactions and outside of our police athletic league, or police activities league, I should say, where we provide programs and activities, and officers can volunteer to be coaches and mentors and interact with youth. This one, we provided outreach and mentoring to juveniles at the Red Wing Juvenile Correctional Facility, listening and empowering to adults at the Faribault Correctional Facility. I know the chief himself has gone out to some of our correctional facilities and spoke to some of the men who have been incarcerated there. Again, bringing that outreach and mentoring and as part of his philosophy, bringing the message of hope as well. Next slide, please. And scroll down a little bit. Thank you. The U-Visa program. This got moved under the Special Crimes Investigation. I administered the U-Visa program as a commander in violent crimes. The U-Visa program is a way for people who are not documented in our country to obtain a temporary visa as a result of their assistance in being helpful in incidents where they or others may have been the victim of a violent crime. This program that we've really worked hard on in terms of helping to communicate with our various communities within the city that have undocumented residents. It's very important that all members in our community feel safe and secure to contact the police if they're victims. We don't want people feeling, and we've striven to try to message this to our immigrant communities, that we are not enforcers of federal immigration law. We are not going to ask people their status in regards to immigration or citizenship, and that our goal is to provide police service and to help people that are victims. The U-Visa program helps with that in the sense that it does offer assistance to the vulnerable immigrant victims who come forward, report criminal activities, and are helpful in the detection, investigation, prosecution, conviction, and or sentencing of violent offenders. We have the U-Visa application says it's reviewed by a police lieutenant. It's now being reviewed by the commander of special crimes, who works in conjunction with other city entities that work heavily with our undocumented and immigrant communities to help build that trust with the community. In February of 18, the Minneapolis Police Department selected a new provider for pre-employment psychological screening for pre-placement fitness and pre-placement and fitness for duty evaluation services. This new provider has a better understanding of the role of wellness, cultural competency, and mental health in potential candidates in line with the Chief's mission, values, and direction for the Minneapolis Police Department, and that contract, it runs through 2021. In January of 18, we incorporated mindfulness and implicit bias training as part of our mandatory in-service training for all officers. In 2018, we established the Community Navigator Program. These are credible community leaders and messengers filling the space where officers are not the most effective. And I have a little bit further on the Navigator Program to help understand that. Let me find it, or I did. Probably the last page I just missed. One moment, there we are. We hired community navigators in 2018. They worked to build community trust and confidence by assisting the Patrol and Investigations Bureau in non-criminal matters that might need more time than a traditional 911 responder would typically have. Their main focus would be outreach toward Minneapolis's diverse communities. They grow traditional and non-traditional partnerships between the police department, service providers, community members while supporting community engagement efforts. They also serve as a resource for community members, patrol officers, investigators, and MPD leadership. They work hand in hand with the community and the police department to generate and recommend workable solutions for identified police community issues and concerns. Their goals are to build community trust, help crime victims find needed resources, help address issues like homelessness, joblessness, and substance abuse, increase community understanding of the police and police understanding of the community. Also, partnering with community engagement teams to reach out to the community and also to help investigations. They have a supervisor, and the community navigators serve the LGBTQIA plus community. There's a domestic intimate partner violence community navigator. There's a Latinx community navigator, a Native American community navigator, African American community navigator, and an East African Somali community navigator. Down, please, one more. You can scroll down to the Supervisor Orientation. It's a little covered up there. Thank you. In January, we also established a Supervisor Orientation training. That one I also have a little bit further on there. I'm always at the wrong one. Pardon me. Maybe I was incorrect. This was put together, looking right at it. We created a new series of leadership and professional development training courses for our personnel. It will help develop officers into future leaders and enhance the skill of our current leadership within the department. From an accountability, performance, professional development lens, we created our first new Supervisor Orientation training, recognizing that the sergeant's role is the most influential and impactful in the department. They are key to ensuring officers are engaging professionally and ethically with our communities. New training ensures that MPD supervisors are well equipped to handle their supervisory role and adhere to the vision and mission of the department. They put them through a very lengthy week of training, involves scenario role playing, meeting with electeds, understanding community meetings, giving them the tools and knowledge on dealing with employee issues, and generally trying to train our new supervisors and sergeants, which we feel is the most key and crucial role in the department, and give them the tools to be effective and strong leaders. In 2018, we also established the Early Intervention System and Health and Wellness Coordinator position that was created to identify officers who needed additional support to address administrative or procedural needs. We recently launched an employee wellness effort titled Code 4 Initiative, I've Got Your Back, to break the stigma associated with mental health among police employees. This also translated into even having an app added onto the phone with wellness resources, wellness tips, wellness messages, and really pushing that wellness message and giving people the tools and the empowerment really to seek out any wellness health questions, and we want people to do that proactive work to keep themselves in the space that they need to be doing the job well, and again, really breaking down any stigma associated with seeking out assistance and help, knowing the difficult nature of the job and of current circumstances even, and that people can reach out and get that assistance that helps make them productive, helps them personally, helps them with their personal lives. That is our goal. I discussed a bit the homeless and vulnerable populations liaisons. That was a unit that we created to perform outreach, engagement, and support to the city's homeless and vulnerable populations. I touched base on this a little bit about equipping and training officers to dispense Narcan or naloxone. And as it is now, we have all our 911 response officers are trained, and we recertify and are equipped with naloxone, so that way we can recognize and treat those who are suffering from opioid overdose right on scene. And since we have done that, we have, I would say, revived numerous people, hundreds of people with naloxone since we have been carrying that. Our discipline matrix was updated in April of 2018. That was updated with clear expectations about compliance with our body-worn camera policy. In 2018, the chief focused on deprioritizing low-level marijuana enforcement, subject to doing undercover details specific to low-level marijuana. That was a directive that we have been following since then. Next page, please. Again, in speaking to the building trust with our immigrant and undocumented communities, we worked in conjunction with our, I know I'm going to end up, I don't want to misstate the name of the department. Yeah, it's not coming back. With our city attorney and with I'm not gonna attempt to mess it up. I'm sorry, I had a moment there to develop placards that we printed in various languages that clearly lay out an understanding of immigrants' rights when being arrested, and those are that centers around their right to not have to answer questions in reference to their status of immigration. And those placards were printed, and that we posted them in the back of all our squad vehicles. In November of 2018, we updated our discipline matrix. That was overhauled and more specifically articulated violations, including additional policies, and provide clearer guidance. In 2019, we participated in the Minnesota Attorney General's Officer-Involved Shooting Task Force. As a participant in this task force convened by the State Attorney General, the mission was utilizing community testimony, research, and best practices to provide recommendations that seek to prevent and reduce officer-involved shooting incidents. We initiated the Lights On program in January of 2019, and this is in lieu of giving people a citation for minor equipment violations. We provide officers with a voucher, so that way if we stop somebody that has a minor equipment violation, we give them a voucher for free auto repairs. Again, not looking to penalize people, or especially financially for having this, but helping them get the means to get these small repairs done. Opioids and overdoses data collection in January of 19. We're tracking citywide opioid and overdose data and working with the health department, fire department, EMS, et cetera, to get a better handle and do a better job of getting information out in regards to opioid and overdose data. We expanded crisis intervention training, as I said before, that it goes to all employees. It goes beyond requirements. Again, it goes beyond the requirements of the state post board, including that transport hold clear form. In 2019, I was also a big participant in working on overhauling the sexual assault investigations policy. I worked with the post board. I was part of a model policy working group with the post board to help develop a model policy for the entire state that the post board adopted, and then also developing and expanding extensively the Minneapolis Police Department sexual assault response policy that we continue to add to. And essentially, our approach really changed into a very victim-centered approach. We incorporated all the investigation standards and recommendations from the Attorney General's office into a new updated sexual assault investigations policy. We trained all our investigators in the forensic experiential trauma and view techniques, or trauma-informed interviewing, which focuses on using sensory type questioning that's victim-centered, trauma-informed. We also have an advocate embedded in the unit from the Sexual Violence Center to provide timely, compassionate, and resourceful advocacy on behalf of survivors. And also embedded in the unit, we have an assistant Hennepin County attorney that can review cases directly and work directly, interact directly with the lieutenant of the sex crimes unit. In fact, they all sit in on a panel and review cases together. So you're getting advocacy, you're getting law enforcement, you're getting prosecution, all weighing in on case review. And then unrestricted sex assault kits must and will be tested within 60 days of receipt by the department.
Economy is looking.
In 2019,
Deputy, I can interrupt you. I'm sorry. I noticed a couple times you referenced POST, and for the members of the public who might be monitoring our meeting who don't know what POST is, and it's not cited somewhere else like it is on Crisis Intervention Training CIT, could you explain briefly what POST is?
POST stands for Peace Officer Standard and Training. It is a state board that licenses and certifies law enforcement agencies and also provides, I would say, mandated standards of training for agencies to follow. It's what all police officers have to have a POST license. We have to obtain, they set the standards for what our continuing education is, what all officers need to be trained on, and at what, how often they need to be trained. So they are essentially the state licensing board for all police officers.
Thank you, Deputy Chief.
I'm sorry, there's so many acronyms, I apologize if I throw things out there that weren't expanded upon. We prohibited warrior-style training in 2019. We're our officers are prohibited from engaging in fear-based training or warrior-style training, both on or off duty. In October of 2019, we created an internal group to support and encourage women's professional leadership within the department. That gets us up through about the end of 2019. And before I touch base on some of the chief's vision moving forward for the MPD, I will pause and see if anyone has any questions based upon that lengthy dissertation. And I'm sorry if I went through it too fast.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? And if so, either indicate that in the chat or use the raising your hand feature on Teams. It looks like Commissioner Rubenstein has a question.
Do you want me just to ask it again?
Sure.
Okay.
Chair Rubenstein.
I wondered if any of, you've gone through a lot of really interesting policy and procedural reforms. And I wondered if any of them were requested or initiated by a member or members of the city council or the mayor, or are they more a reflection of best practices across the country?
You know, it's a lot of all of that, really. Whenever we have incidents or things that occur, we're always analyzing things, whether or not policy should be changed or updated to improve it. The post board comes with recommendations as to policy changes that we bring into effect, and also things that we learn and you see through best practices, other agencies, entities like PERF, which is the Police Executive Research Forum, IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police. These are also large academic organizations that are always striving to come up with what would be considered best practices and standards for law enforcement. Additionally, other resources include the Major City Chiefs, an organization of the largest police agencies in the country. Again, another place that, you know, good ideas are shared and modified and copied and taken if we see something that would work for our organization. Then there is the mayor clearly can have directives as to what he or she feels is an important aspect to that they feel the department should focus on. We do get input and direction from the council as well. I've been on many council members will be active and take part in discussions surrounding issues such as our body-worn cameras, the sexual assault response, our sexual assault kit policies. These were highly discussed with various council members, and in terms of keeping them in the loop. We present fairly frequently to council, either at public safety or POGO, which is the I think Casey can help me understand what's the acronym for POGO, so I don't. But it's the council presentation is they will request
policy, oversight, and government operations.
There we are. Thank you. Policy, oversight, and government operations. But we'll be requested to give presentations and provide information, and we'll take back feedback and direction as well from the council. So, and then there's always the vision and the vision and direction of the chief himself or herself, depending on who the chief is, and they drive obviously a lot of where they want the department to go and policy itself. And I know I know we'll be getting into some of the most latest policies that we've been updating. And I know the chief has been busy in dealing with things in terms of policy change, but we have definitely been very busy in overhauling and looking at our use of force policies in terms of, again, stressing the sanctity of life, utilizing the least amount of force that's necessary, and really developing an expansive and change. And in that sense, we've been reviewing our use of force policy over the past year, and recently made changes and updated portions of the policy that focus on key areas such as de-escalation and new reportable force requirements. We are really trying to focus on I would say, the importance of de-escalation, of documenting de-escalation, of documenting force, of expanding what reportable force is, and really stressing on the importance of sanctity of life, of first doing no harm, and really trying to give the best guidance we feel that not only lives up to that philosophy, but helps give officers what we feel is a good, clear roadmap as to what it is that they should and shouldn't do.
And I understand that there have been discussions and there's a lot of communication back and forth, but have members of the city council actually come to the police department and said, we'd like you to adopt this policy, or, you know, did they initiate any of these reforms you've talked about?
I don't know if it's a direct, like, coming and saying, we want you to make this policy, but many of our policy changes are generally rooted in larger conversations. So it's difficult to answer that and I think the question was for the past 3 years. I wouldn't doubt that there probably has been moments that has occurred, but I know that policy change is generally done as part of a much larger conversation. And if we are doing such as we have a very expansive use of force policy change, that's been something. Use of force, obviously police use of force, has been a topic that's being discussed, I think, on all levels of the government. So that doesn't operate within a vacuum.
Thank you.
Great. I think Commissioner Kozak has a question.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very quickly, and I had to step away for several minutes. I don't know if you discussed internally what kind of mental health programs are available, to the members of the MPD, to the officers, because what I know about police officers, it's a job it's a high stress job, even in the best of circumstances. And it's the one job that I know of that can change people's personality and behavior dramatically over time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And you are very correct in that. And we've created a wellness unit and to focus on kind of bridging that gap. When it comes to what resources are available, there's resources through the health provider that the city has. And I discussed a bit, and this is kind of like, it gives you kind of an example a little bit. We have a phone app that is right on our officers' phones that goes and gives them right at the touch of a hand here how to get help, support for critical and traumatic incidents, trusted therapists. They have a menu of trusted therapists that they can choose from if they want to speak with somebody. Peer support, which is obviously very important. Do you want to talk to someone else within the profession that might have and can provide you with support? Health and wellness unit, which gets into other aspects other than just psychological help. Megan and I said, talking about physical health, maybe financial health. All of these can also play into mental health. Chaplain support, human resources support, a wellness toolkit. There's videos and other things that connect to help do this: fitness, nutrition, injury prevention, lots of mindfulness, even into meditation, additional resources. It's very expansive, and it's been something that we've been really trying to focus on. And I think it's something that as this department, and I think even as a profession now, but we're really going leaps and bounds much better about addressing how do we maintain the wellness of our officers mentally and physically, but especially handling the stress. Are they weathering the stress in the best way? And do they have the resources to do that? And really encouraging people to seek out those resources because we all, as much as we can experience physical damage, and people don't seem to mind getting physical damage, or at least, but we also experience a lot of psychological damage. And people need to be as proactive in getting the help for that as they do about the physical damage that they get. So yes, I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, and thank you. And from what I take from what you're saying, that the stigma attached to going to the shrink it has been reduced, and there's been an effort within the department to encourage people, given the application you just showed on the phone and all these efforts. Thank you very much. It's very helpful.
Absolutely.
Great. I believe that we have a question from Commissioner Perry.
Yes. Deputy Chief, what is so you have those initiatives that you laid out before us. What is and I think it will vary from one to another, but I'm wondering a couple of things. What is your expectation for them to take hold? So it's a policy change, and you have some tools to make those policy changes take place. And I'm wondering what kind of timeline you would be expecting them to take place in, and what kind of accountability tools you have to make sure that they are happening. Because when we look at the recent tragedy with George Floyd, we look at your policy things and we say, how could this possibly have happened? And so I don't want to talk about a case that's ongoing here, but some people would argue that change is not happening fast enough. And I'm wondering, do you have an expectation when you put a policy in place how long it should take for an organization of 800 some officers, and what kind of accountability those officers are held to, so that you can see the kind of changes that need to be seen as quickly as possible?
Thank you for the question. It's a wide variety of I would say, ways of some things can be measured, some things not so much, and some things it's more of an attitudinal thing, and so it's very difficult to measure. A lot of the things I laid out, some that are policy changes, that's a policy change. I mean, that's enforceable by discipline and internal things if people are not following the policy. When it comes to the use of force policy that I just highlighted, in order to for accountability, measurement, tracking, that is probably one of the easier ones to do because there's so much data built into that. Through use of force reporting, through our use of force dashboards that are real-time fed by our reporting system, and by creating more set points for them to indicate things. That will be very key in identifying or seeing if there's instances where where I would say an inordinate amount or a questionable number of force incidents are occurring with a particular person. It will be much easier to identify that. That is also, all of these different use of force incidents are reviewed by a supervisor, and then they also get reviewed by people within internal affairs. So there's many layers to that. So when you look at a policy change such as that, that's built in, that has many different built-in layers of accountability. When you look at some different programs such as, like our leadership programs or things like that, sustainability, it comes with, does the department continue to staff it and fund it and find it to be worthwhile? And I know our administration does and continues to do so, but there's been, I think sometimes some of these initiatives through varied police administrations, sometimes they don't have that sustainability. They don't, because they're not codified in the policy or procedure like I just discussed. So from that perspective, I would like to think the investments that we're making into leadership are really are things that are going to be sustained. So, like I said, many of the things that we're dealing with, or that I highlighted, If there are policy changes, those things are very much ingrained into how we do things. The policy is very laid out as to how you will do things. Initiatives are usually an investment of personnel into a unit, a philosophy, a way of doing things, not so much ingrained in our policy, but part of what the chief or city leadership would like us to do. And then if we get into some of the things like wellness and all that, I think I can speak pretty strongly that that is something that's going to be here to stay. I don't see many agencies, moving away from things such as that. And I think, and so I can see what you're trying to drive at, but like I said, it's kind of a myriad of different things. Like I said, most of the things that we can measure now, when you look at things as discussed before, like the co-responder program, you can, again, you look at the outcomes and the metrics. Are our calls for service going down in particular with that particular type of a call? Are our negative interactions with people who are experiencing mental illness go down? That's the goal. So you look at what the goals of that program are, and are you meeting those goals? That's an easy way to track that as a metric.
When you set up, if I could ask a follow-up question, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. When you set up a program, or whether it's a policy change or an initiative, I assume that you are setting up some sort of metrics of when you would like to see it fully implemented and take hold. And
well, policy will take hold immediately. I mean, that's kind of like almost like changing a statute or a law. When it's in effect, it's in effect. It doesn't, we don't kind of phase in policy changes. That becomes this is what you shall do. They're very written, you shall do this and you shall do that. When it comes to things like, say, take the Navigator Program. The goal of the Navigator Program obviously is to increase community access, to increase community access to information, to help victims from communities connect with a myriad of different services. Obviously, the goal of that is to benefit the public, to benefit police community relations and trust. That takes time, and that, how do you set up a metric for that? So that is something that I think requires the dedication of a lot of time, and I would say a little bit more anecdotal feedback as to how things are working.
If I may, though, the use of force that just came out, will we see the effects of that immediately? It's a policy change.
Well, when it comes out and it takes effect, then it is immediate in terms of what that policy says you will do or won't do. That is immediate. And
somehow the officers just know that that's what needs to be done and will do it.
The policy changes come out, and they have they have explanations with them. They're discussed in roll calls. Many of our policy changes, if they're substantive, are folded into our in-service training also. When we overhauled sexual assault response, when we overhauled domestic abuse response, we incorporated entire sections of our yearly in-service training to continually go over those policies. Use of force will be no different in that respect. The policy comes out, it's explained, it's discussed at roll calls, it's discussed by supervisors, and then it's followed up by continued training and discussion in our in-service to make sure that there's no questions surrounding what it is that they should and shouldn't be doing.
Okay, thanks. And thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to extend my comments and questions there.
Great. No worries, Commissioner Perry. I believe that Commissioner Garcia had her hand raised as well.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My question was an offshoot of that about if you have been able to measure the impact of those policies empirically at all. Or do you do like periodic measurements, and can some of those improvements be attributed to some of these policies?
You know, one of the policies that I was very much involved in, that you take like the sexual assault response policy, and I think the way you, a way you measure that is, one, you want more successful investigations. But ironically, one way you measure whether or not you're having trust in that realm is if you actually have more reports. Sexual assault, much like domestic abuse, is a underreported crime, and a lot of it is because of lack of trust in the system. It's kind of a counterproductive thing that if the more trust and the more you build out your capacity to intersect with people like that, the more work you're going to get.
Sure.
So we looked at how can we make it so we improve trust and people feel that they can come to us and that we're doing things in the right manner. So that is one that's you might measure it in an unusual way of saying, have we had more people come forward to report to us? And then you can also measure it a little bit more about the feedback that we get from our partners in the advocacy groups, and also feedback that we get from the victims themselves as to how they feel that they've been treated by officers. One policy change, and someone raised this with me, and I'm glad they did because it slipped my mind. But something that we can measure and that we have looked at is putting restrictions on police pursuits. We've recognized that high-speed chases are inherently dangerous for everyone involved: the officers, the public, the person who is fleeing in the vehicle, and we really want to be restrictive and only engage in motor vehicle pursuits for certain levels of offenses. We don't want people getting into a high-speed pursuit over a traffic violation. We don't want people getting into a high-speed pursuit when the offense is a stolen vehicle, because we know that many of these stolen vehicles are vehicles that are left running with the keys in them, and the level of offense is just not worth risking the public over. And so we have instituted changes and policy changes that went into effect that limited police pursuits to a certain handful of offenses that circle around violent crime, and our police pursuits have gone down considerably. So that is something that we can measure, and as a result, we consider that a success. Our goal was to reduce the number of dangerous interactions on the street, and thereby reducing situations where people could get struck and injured, or crash, and all the bad things that come from things like that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Garcia. We're going to try to end around 6:15. I know that folks are maybe anxious to move on with their evening. I do have one question that I wanted to ask you, Deputy Chief Forrest. And this is related to the proposed amendment submitted by City Council. What, if anything, would you offer from your professional perspective and given your position and experience that you think would be important for the Charter Commission to consider as it evaluates the current proposed amendment submitted by the City Council?
That's I will tell you my professional opinion on this, and that is a lot of what we discussed here really highlighted, I'd say, the complexities of a lot of the issues that we face out there, that there's a lot of intersection between people who are in crisis, people who are experiencing homelessness, poverty, addiction, and police work. And that's not to say that there isn't also a lot of police calls for service that we're going to. I understand that there are great programs out there, and in terms that I would say get the right professionals to the right calls to help alleviate some of this. But there's an awful lot of need for law enforcement itself, and specifically, and I know you'll get I'd say a much more in-depth talk about this from the city attorney. But when people think of policing, I don't want them just to think of a police officer in a squad car responding to a 911 call. That is what people think is the most visible sign of policing. And the police department and the services it provides goes much deeper into that. The layers of investigative services that we provide and that are very specialized and require sworn law enforcement and licensed law enforcement, not only to be able to do that job, but legally in order to effect arrests, sign search warrants, get subpoenas. There's an inordinate need for law enforcement in that realm. And although I agree that there is room for, and I know that the MPD is participating in the 911 working group to look at what calls for service should be maybe handled in a different way and not by police officers, and I've been a great supporter of that. I think what we've seen is we're at our best when we're working together. I don't see it as a either or, but a both. I think that there's great opportunity for law enforcement to partner with many of these alternatives to handling a lot of the things that I discussed, and not from a complete handoff to say that we're not going to even have anything to do with them anymore. Because as we've pointed out, or as I've discussed earlier, law enforcement will have a lot of intersection and nexus with people who could use further professional assistance, and we recognize when people are beginning to slip into those sorts of problems. So I'd rather cultivate that partnership into something that we have I would say a layered approach to handling issues within the city. But when it comes to having law enforcement, there's no substitute and there's no alternative to who is going to investigate child abuse, or who's going to investigate sexual assault, and who's going to investigate homicide, and who's going to respond to some of the problems and issues that are physical safety issues that we do. And I know we didn't get a chance to get into a lot of the interagency partnerships, but the way we've handled and had to experience large-scale events from a law enforcement perspective, our interrelations with other places, doing things like hosting Super Bowls and massive events, down to, and I was busy all last week and weekend, starting with Wednesday when we had the issues that we did on Nicollet Mall, and having to swing into that level of response with our partners. So I just want to highlight that there's a lot more to law enforcement and policing than responding to a call for service in a squad car, and I just want to make sure that gets that's just my 2 cents on that.
Great. Thank you for that. And Commissioner and Chair Rubenstein has the last question.
Yes.
Thank you. After that last answer, I hate even to ask another question.
Sure.
It's so helpful. Thank you. But we're talking about the charter, of course. That's why we're here, some of us. And so I wanted to ask about the current charter provision containing the population to MPD ratio, understanding that it refers to employees, not just sworn officers. But is the current staffing level now consistent with that requirement? And how does it align with national standards or best practice?
That's a challenging question. I can say first it'll depend upon what was. That's okay. It's going to depend upon what we consider. You know, I've seen some varied census numbers, and I think the one I looked at gave a census of 429 in 2019. If you apply the charter provision of 0.0017 to that population, you end up with basically 730 employees. Currently, we are at, on the books in terms of people that we're carrying, civilian and sworn, 1,031 employees. So we're above what that charter provision would be if it, and I guess this would also come from the interpretation of the city attorney when it says employees. Does that mean civilian and sworn, or is it just referencing sworn? Currently, we're at, on the books, 856 sworn. We do have a significant number that are on personnel leaves, which is a variety of different leaves, but they essentially are not, they're not working right now on the street or available to work. And we have 96 people that are on personnel leave, which gives us basically a functional strength of about 760 sworn personnel. So that's kind of where we're at. So when it comes to national best standards, there really isn't a national best standard because and this kind of dovetails into the fact that based on a city council directive, the city is currently finalizing, looking at vendors to do a staffing and efficiency study of the Minneapolis Police Department to look into all things such as overall staffing of patrol, the staffing of investigations, to see, are we adequately staffed? Are we using our staff in the best way possible? Looking at our civilian staff, so that will probably provide a much deeper dive into that. You can look at different agencies around the country and say, well, this is a city that has this much population and they have this many officers, and it runs the gamut from agencies that have less officers than do and agencies that have significantly more officers than we do. But a metro area also kind of plays into that. Minneapolis is in a metro area sitting right next to a city of about 300,000, and we also have most of the major sports and entertainment in our downtown, which then plays into, what is the population that you're serving, and how does that differ from a city that may not have that? There's a lot of question as to what is the ideal, and I think you need to look at it in three different buckets, and that is, what is your ideal staffing for 911 response? What's your ideal staffing for investigative need, and then administrative oversight would probably be the last one. I know that the chief last year proposed that we needed additional officers in his opinion, and I know that that is people have varying opinions on that. So it's difficult there is no, I would say, national best practice because, your staffing is based on, I would say, the need, the amount of calls for service that you have. And a lot of that can be very unique to your area. Like I said, if you're in a very bustling and lively metropolitan area, as we are, surrounded by, another large city, some highly populous suburbs, you kind of are larger than what your population is. If you're a city that is kind of out on an island and by yourself, maybe not so much. So I know we'll be doing and getting a deep dive look at what I'm saying outside company is going to come in and take a look and supposedly give us a deep analysis on that. I wish I could give you something more specific than that, but I did some looking and there really isn't anything that I've seen in the major, I would say, policing think tanks that discuss what what a national best practice for staffing is.
Thank you. That's probably a much better answer than the question I was asking. So I think because we're running out of time, Chair Newborn, we probably should move to the last item on the agenda, which is next steps. And we don't really have anything to say except we'll meet again next week and we'll have another set of interviews.
Great.
Good.
Thank you so much, Deputy Chief.
Yes, thank you very much.
You are most welcome.
With that,
Madam Chair?
Sure.
Who is, I'm sorry, I don't seem to know where the work plan is, so I don't know who's speaking next week.
I'll send you another copy, Commissioner Perry.
Okay, I think you did that, and I can't find it.
Okay, I can easily send it again.
Okay. And that information is in there.
In the hope that we don't have further discussion, we've concluded all business to come before the Charter Commission Public Safety Work Group, and I thank my co-chair and all of you, and without objection, we stand adjourned.
Thank you, Andrea, and everybody. Hope to have better internet connection tomorrow.
Okay.
And thank you to our guest, who was terrific.
Yes.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. See you all tomorrow.